Good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, April the 30th, and welcome to 7 Investing Live. This is our live stream event we host every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time to put a spotlight on several of the stock market's most intriguing opportunities. My name is Simon Erickson. I'm the founder and CEO of 7 Investing. I'm joined by our executive producer, Heather Horton, today. Today is actually Thursday. It's not a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, but we've got a special show for you with some timely content. The topic we're going to be discussing on today's show is why we are rebuying in to a company called NuScale Power. This is a company that for the very first time ever, we had a previous recommendation of it on the 7 Investing Scorecard. We sold it from the 7 Investing Scorecard, and then just this last week, we're buying back into it again. We're going to talk a little bit about why we're doing that, what the history of this company is, what our history with this company is on 7 Investing Scorecards purposes, and then what it is we're so intrigued about it right now. But if you do want to see all of our recommendations, all of our long-term buying opportunities in the stock market, you can check out 7investing.com. If you are ready to get started and see all of our premium content, 7investing.com/subscribe there. You can see the link right there at the bottom of the page. If you click on that, you get set up for the annual option. Absolutely free for the first 7 days. Free access to everything that we offer on the site. That includes the new recommendations. That includes the 5 best buys every month. And then, of course, special bonus content like the ones that we're giving here today. So I encourage everybody to check that out. But I'm going to go ahead and jump in today to the topic at hand, which is NuScale Power. And so I'm going to pull up, if you give me just one moment, to the presentation I've got for you. This is a very intriguing company. Here it is right here. That is in the energy industry. So NuScale Power is making small modular reactors. These are nuclear reactors that are modular. So you can build them at a small scale and then scale them up to larger sizes if you want to. This is very intriguing in the past for certain reasons, because we were certainly experiencing an energy shortage just in general. But then look what's happened even more lately. There's been a demand that has far exceeded supply when it comes to AI data center infrastructure. They need a lot of power. Those data centers are consuming a lot of power, and we don't have a whole lot of solutions on how to provide it. And so perhaps the strongest statement that we can say is that AI data center power demand is now at gigawatt level scale. We can't keep up with the demand that's out there right now. We're trying our best, but there's still a lot of power that needs to be provided, especially baseload power, not just renewables, which are only available when the sun's shining. There's only available when the wind is blowing. We need baseload emission-free power that's available on demand and is also available behind the meter. Previously, 7 Investing has looked at several solutions to this, keeping in mind that my own background is from alternative energy strategy, working at one of the largest integrated oil companies in the world. We were building out the business plans for alternative energy. And so we looked at a lot of these technologies before. I'm very familiar with a lot of them. And in fact, for 7 Investing's purposes, we added several of these to the watch list of new stock ideas. Schneider Electric, the power systems, the transformers that this French company was providing had a 18-month lead time to even get them available. That's incredible when you've already got a year and a half of booked capacity already on the books, and you're basically selling out of the power systems you can provide. Fantastic company there. A lot of demand for them. Tecogen, the natural gas cogeneration. This is something they can use for offloading power. If you wanted to use natural gas for power generation and then also use that in a more efficient way, you do cogeneration. Tecogen was doing some really cool stuff with that. We highlighted them in November 2025. And then Bloom Energy and the solid oxide fuel cells. This was technology originally developed for NASA for the Mars missions, right? How can you actually create power out of natural gas without combusting it? You want to just separate out the electron stream. I'm going to pull that into a power source and then reform it at the end. This is a great way to do that. In fact, we featured Bloom Energy on our watch list just last month. In March of 2026, the stock is now up over 125% since we put it on the watch list just within the past 30 days. You can see that these companies are playing a vital role in the world today, especially now that power is even more in demand because of these AI data center build-outs. And so this brings me back to a company that I think that we bought at the right time, but then we sold too soon. But I think it's got a bright future, and that company is called NuScale Power. And so I'd like to go back in time to September of 2022. This is when we originally recommended NuScale for our 7investing purposes. We were seeing that McKinsey and other demand forecasts out there were saying that just globally, we were already in an energy crisis, right? There was already going to need to be a doubling of energy supply to match demand by the year 2030. Yes, 30 years is a long outlook. That's a long period. You got 3 decades to figure it out. But we were also seeing a lot of older coal plants being retired. There were questions about carbon sequestration and the impact that was going to have on the environment. In fact, just fossil fuels as a whole were being looked at much more closely. That was leading to new alternative sources of energy that would be able to supply for this upcoming demand. And then, of course, in 2022, we were in September of 2022, we were 7 months in from when Russia first invaded Ukraine. There was going to be a lot of uncertainties related to geopolitical tensions, especially with natural gas supply that might be coming from Russia or other parts of that world. Of course, there's been a lot that's happened even since then. Now we've got another Mideast crisis, going on with Iran right now. We've got heightening geopolitical tensions with China and other things out there. This is not going away. There's still a lot of demand for energy that we don't yet have adequate supply to provide. So small modular reactors were considered these safe and scalable forms of energy. In fact, NuScale, just a few months previous to our original recommendations, back in July of 2022, just became the very first company to receive certification from the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission for its small modular reactor design. It was the only company that had gotten the certifications for SMRs to be used in operations in the United States. It hadn't deployed any of these yet. This was simply the technology that was very, very intriguing and interesting. But the NRC said, yes, NuScale, we like everything that you've done. We approve your design. You are now certified for operations in the United States. And so they said, great, let's go out. Let's do a demonstration project. And they started working with a municipal district in Utah to have the first operational SMR plant available by the year 2029. At this time, keeping in mind the chart on the right there, you shows that nuclear is really the only low carbon or no carbon energy source that provides a scalable 24/7 base load power, especially when compared to other renewables or other fossil fuel sources such as coal or natural gas. And at the time, NuScale was selling with an overall enterprise value, that's its market cap plus its long-term debt, of only minus cash of only about $250 million, right? This was super, super early to get into the nuclear party, seeing that there were some things that were going to demand this technology and its solutions out there. And so things went pretty well over the next couple of years. NuScale, continued to develop this project, but then all of a sudden in November of 2023, which is about a little bit over a year after our original recommendation, the Utah project got canceled. And in fact, a large part of that was due to inflation that happened in 2022. For everyone who remembers, 4 years ago, what had happened, the Fed jacked up rates, jacked up the Fed funds rate 7 times in a single year, which of course pushed up the capital costs of new construction of new plants, such as a small modular nuclear reactor plant. Also pushed up a lot of the raw material prices that would be necessary for the construction of those facilities as well. And so all of these Fed hikes and all the inflation that we saw in 2022 led to, quote, soaring costs and a lack of subscriber interest. All of a sudden, SMRs went, the cost of providing power, nuclear power that was provided by a small modular reactor, went all the way up from $58 per megawatt hour to an estimated $89 per megawatt hour in a single year. Right? In residents, if you were working on this plant out there in Utah, all of a sudden you say, this is just not economical because our residents that would be taking this power don't want to pay that much higher of rates just to be using nuclear power. All the other benefits are still there, it's just simply not an economical project at the time. And so they canceled the Utah project. It was kind of the worst time for NuScale, who had been kind of investing in this, investing in their own capacity, investing in their own manufacturing of these SMR modules. All of a sudden, the company was stuck with only $197 million of cash, and it was burning through an operating loss of about $58 million quarterly. So if you multiply that by 4, you get to an annual run rate. You can see that it was very quickly going to run out of money unless it was going to have a terribly dilutive secondary offering in the public markets. And so we said, you know what? This is a really neat idea. We think we were wrong on this. We saw a lot of financial concerns with the business on the balance sheet. We saw a lot of stagnation in where this was going because the costs were just not effective anymore, not efficient enough to be economically viable. We sold our position in NuScale in December of 2023. Big mistake in retrospect, because that was the low point, which again went on to recover. By the way, there was this thing called AI that all of a sudden, as we just mentioned a few slides back, was really heating up the demand for electricity and power that could be provided for them, right? This was not as big of a deal in 2020 to 2021 to 2022 and 2023. And then all of a sudden you start seeing these gigawatt scale power supply contracts coming online, right? Oracle has just hired Bloom Energy for 2.8 gigawatts worth of future power. Elon is saying that he wants to have this new lab that he's adding to in Tennessee go up to 5 gigawatts of power. You've got Meta. You've got Mark Zuckerberg saying that he wants his Hyperion lab to be a 5 gigawatt power production facility. 5 gigawatt demand of power for his AI data centers. These are supercomputers that are soaking up a lot of power, and we don't have solutions yet on how to provide that. And so all of a sudden, SMRs became the rage. These become super exciting in the year 2023 and 2024. And so right after we sold our position, all of a sudden the market started obsessing again with SMRs and NuScale especially. And so look at this, NuScale's stock price, even though I think we probably were justified in selling based on the financial concerns we were seeing, but NuScale's stock price went from $3 a share in December of 2023 all the way up to $52 a share in July of 2025. Less than 2 years later, that was a 17x return for investors, largely due to optimism in the opportunity that small modular reactors could provide for the energy industry. Keep in mind, NuScale still does not have an operational SMR plant. Keep in mind, the financials are still exactly where they were before. Keep in mind, we still had concerns about the financial situation of the business. The only thing that had changed is there was a boatload of demand that was going to be needed for AI data centers. There was not a whole lot of solutions for it. This was in addition to all of the previous drivers that we had about why there need to be new energy supplies. So even though it peaked in July of 2025, we've now seen over the past year or so, a lot of that optimism settling back down, right? We're back into a difficult time geopolitically right now. We are definitely back to uncertainties about things that are going on in the world. We are definitely calmed down a little bit about SMRs because it seems like it's still going to take at least 5 years, maybe more, to having an operational facility out there. And so as you can see, NuScale's stock price has now declined from a peak of $52 a share and a $7 billion market cap in July of 2025. We're back now to $11 a share and a $3.6 billion market cap today. That is higher than our previous recommendation when we got in at less than $3 a share. But it's still, things have changed since then. Things have changed in the last 2.5 years. We're looking at a different ball game, and I think that SMRs still play a vital role. And I'm really intrigued by this opportunity once again. And so why NuScale? Why now again? Why are we adding this back? Why are we buying back into NuScale here in April, almost May of 2026? Well, I think that, this mini nuclear fit for purpose is going to find its place in the future of the energy industry. I think that there is applications for this. Again, to describe a little bit more about what this is, these power modules are much smaller than traditional nuclear plants. The largest nuclear power plant in the United States that's in operations right now is for Georgia Power. They have got a reactor, multiple reactors, that are providing 4.5 gigawatts of power, which cost over $35 billion just in the upgrade that they finished over a 15-year time frame about a decade ago. Very expensive, very, very long time to build. Of course, a lot of safety concerns, a lot of regulatory oversight for things like that. A small NuScale power module is only 77 megawatts per module. And so if you put 12 of those together into a modular system design, you're up to around a gigawatt of scale. And of course, if you're talking in terms of data centers who are soon consuming 1 to 2 to 5 gigawatts of power, you can build a small nuclear power plant to provide power for those that you can then scale up over time in not a ton of time. You don't need to take 15 years to build a new power plant. You can actually design, construct, transport, and put these in place on site and operational within a 3-year period, 36 months. They are 24 power 24/7 power generation. Again, these are not intermittent like you would see out of a renewable power source. These are baseload power. They're safe and they're resilient. And you can either sell it through a power agreement that you might have for a company that where you're providing, the power for them to take off of line from your reactors where they're paying you for the power, or a customer operator model where you're actually going to have them buy them up outright and then do all the operations and the management themselves. And so the levelized cost of energy for a nuclear power plant that's coming from SMR, that is below traditional nuclear. That's good. That means it's cheaper to provide than traditional nuclear. It's actually closer to parity with natural gas closed combustion. So that's really good. That, if you can have something at fossil fuel level comparable to small modular reactor, that's really, really good. And right now, the revenue that NuScale is generating, very small, $31 million a year. That's mostly just licensing deals with companies that are interested in evaluating the technologies. But they've got a really interesting partnership. And this is part of the key thesis of why I'm buying back in. Last year, the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is providing energy for a 6-state region right there in the kind of in the middle of the United States, they secured a $400 million grant from the Department of Energy to explore and then deploy small modular reactors. And then they partnered up with one of their local utilities, the Intra 1 utility, to provide up to 6 gigawatts of nuclear power for future projects. NuScale is directly involved in this because NuScale is the strategic technology partner of Intra 1 Energy, who would either be selling the SMRs to them directly and outright or providing the power that's generated. Now, if you do the math on this, 6 gigawatts would equate to 6 of NuScale's 12 modular systems all put together. That is going to be a massive project. In fact, we don't know exactly what the economics of this are going to look like. But if you dig into the current market data and you kind of look at what's going on out there with different SMR ideas of how much this is going to cost, how much traditional nuclear costs, how much this is going up against for other alternative energies, this could very easily be a project that runs $50 billion or more in terms of total capital cost to construct. I'm not saying that this is going to happen tomorrow, but it is interesting that the TVA has approved this project. They have approved the economics based on what they're seeing right now. And in fact, this is probably going to be somewhere in the time frame of 2033, call it 7 years out into the future of when something like this actually would get deployed and be fully operational. But for something that has got this kind of magnitude that would easily make this stock a 20 bagger, worth 20 times your initial investment at the period that we're at right now or more, I think the risk reward is back in favor for us as investors, which is why we're adding NuScale back to the 7investing scorecard at $12 a share here on Friday, April 24th of 2026. That was last Friday. So I'm pretty excited about this one. This was part of a package that we published for our 7investing subscribers last Friday. We also included 5 sell recommendations of companies that we are actually kicking off the island, booting off the 7investing scorecard. And then, of course, buying back this one stock, that was what NuScale was, which we featured here today. But if you're curious, if you want to see a little bit more of the details on why we're buying back into NuScale, or you want to see those 5 stocks that we sold off of the scorecard, please check out 7investing.com/subscribe. I think this is a great opportunity to get in. I've given you hopefully some good content here. We can look at things and, kind of see why are we selling these stocks? Why are we buying back into NuScale? What's going on with 7investing? This is a good time to be doing things like that. Heather, I'm going to open myself up for cross-examination. I hope the slideshow went through and we were able to see.
It looked great.
We're talking about NuScale, but if you have any questions about NuScale, really good company, kind of an exciting opportunity, I think.
And full disclosure, I own this one too. So yes, first of all, one of your slides said that the expected life expectancy, the life expectancy of one of these reactors, did it say it was 60 years?
Easily, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. If NuScale is, how are they making money if they're lasting so long? Is it the hope that they'll just have to keep selling them, or is it likely that they will set up their own power where they're selling off power as well?
It's one of the two, or even maybe both of them, right? You can have a PPA, which is where you're selling the power continually to whoever wants to buy it from you. Then it's on NuScale to do all the operations of the plant, make sure that it's running, at capacity, all that stuff's on them. And then they just sell the power to whoever wants to buy it at a negotiated rate. The other option is if you've got a really, really big power producer like the TVA, or, a really large utility, they might just say, hey, we've got the manpower to man this. Sell us the reactors and we'll take care of all of it and all the operations and things. And then you just kind of have more of like, you'll have an ongoing safety contract, make sure that everything's up to snuff and compliant and whatnot. Certainly more advantageous to be providing the power over longer periods of time, but kind of the way that, you structure those agreements is still largely in flux.
That's a really interesting move that TVA is making, because I know a lot of their hydroelectric infrastructure is starting to age out, and will age out by 2030, which means that'll be a very fitting. Um, there we go. We also have a public question. All right, so we've got from Damian Brennan. We've got, I've been wanting to buy one of these for a while. You've convinced me to pull the trigger on SMR.
Thanks, Damien.
I love SMRs. I think they're a very interesting source of future power. I know a lot of people have a lot of anxieties about nuclear power, but we've discussed it's actually very safe. It's one of the safest forms of energy production. Um, what would you say to people who have those kind of fears about nuclear in general?
Well, I think it's only right to put up a disclaimer, first of all, and say this is a very high risk investment. I would not recommend anybody back the truck up on NuScale and say, oh, this is a done deal. Look at this. They got a huge project. Everything is going to be smooth sailing. No. This is going to take a ton of work. And again, probably between 5 and 10 years to even get operational, which is a really long time, right? And as somebody who worked directly in these kinds of projects, I can tell you that is a very long timeline, but it's also very realistic. There's just so much permitting and regulatory and operational stuff that goes into these kinds of projects. But on the other hand, even if let's just say worst case that project falls apart, like the Utah project fell apart, right? Romania has already got their own project that they want to bring online by the early 2030s as well. They have already contracted and approved financially to buy 6 of NuScale's reactors, right? So NuScale's in process of building them. It's going to take 36 months, but this is another project that even if TVA, worst case scenario, falls apart, you've got another partner in Romania Power that's going to actually take on SMRs. What tends to happen is when you start getting projects deployed, other companies see that and they say, okay, wow, my competitor just built a project with a new technology. They made it financially and economically viable. And now all of a sudden, they've got something that I don't. So maybe we should go out and start evaluating this too. Maybe we should be looking at SMRs, and maybe we should have a strategic partnership with a company like NuScale as well. And so you start to see kind of this trickle at the beginning of companies that are kind of interested. Then all of a sudden the government funds it. You get a grant, the TVA. TVA commits to a big project that could move the needle for this entire business, this entire industry, really. And then all of a sudden you start to see other things that'll go into this. So I think that NuScale is not a one-hit wonder like so many of those 80s bands that we love to listen to were. This is something that like you've got something that like you've thrown the dart and now you're going to start seeing a whole bunch of other darts collecting around the same space. I think there's going to be a lot of momentum that catches on now that you've got an agreement that happened last year. That was a catalyst I was waiting for. That's why I'm so interested in SMRs and the NuScale. But back to the point, Damien, again, going to be a really long time, going to be a patient waiting game for this. Don't be expecting, updates every week or month on how things are going. This is going to be a multiple years time frame for this kind of investment.
And one of your other sides said that it was a 36-month production time. And once we get to that place where they're fully operatable, is that a production time that with scale will be able to be lessened?
I don't know. I don't think so yet. The 36 months right now is the amount of time that it takes for NuScale to purchase all the materials and everything that needs to build these reactors. Keep in mind, they're 80 feet tall. You've got to build the nuclear core inside of them. You've got to do all the subsystems and the cooling and all these kinds of things. Maybe they can get that down a little bit, but I don't think significantly, at least based on how the design looks right now. But again, that's 36 months from basically getting an order or somebody that's committing to say, okay, we'll give you some money up front, go out and do your thing and build these for us. They transport everything on site. They get it operational 36 months later.
And most of those projects take quite a bit of time. Other aspects of building a data center or whatever they be used for also take a lot of time. So they hopefully wouldn't be waiting on them too long. And then finally, what are some of the other energy companies out there doing SMRs other than NuScale? Is Constellation Energy still working on them in their own division?
It's something I need to take a closer look at right now, Heather. I know that in terms of the ones that are actually certified, NuScale is the only one that's got NRC certification to operate in the United States. That doesn't mean they're the only ones that are pursuing it, but they do have patents and they do have a design that's the only ones that's been given the check mark of yes, you can operate. Again, doesn't mean they're the only ones that are going to be looking into this space. In terms of different energies too, let's not just say that NuScale is only going to be for residential. This was originally designed, when they started coming out with the concept, the company went public and raised money and kind of got its initial optimism. It was going to be baseline utility power, to provide for the grid and provide for residents, because they were huge. These are big plants, gigawatts. The only thing that could even make sense economically for this was put it on the grid, put a gigawatt of power on the grid and then let people that weren't getting enough get it. And so there was limited opportunities for stuff like that. But now all of a sudden you start to see these data centers like we've been talking about so much on these shows. A 5 gigawatt data center, which is fit for purpose for one data center for one company. I mean, that's a lot of power, right? That is something that is going to take a ton of demand. And so what is big enough that you don't just want to have a solar farm that's, the size of Massachusetts providing that much power? Wind is going to be intermittent. You've got natural gas combustion, which is giving off a lot of emissions. What could even get you to 5 gigawatts of power if you wanted to even build a data center of that size? You basically have natural gas as an option. You've got solid oxide fuel cells from Bloom Energy, which we just saw a lot of deals on that one here recently. And then you've got SMRs, mini nukes are even kind of the only 3 right now that at that kind of scale can even be provided. So it seems like it fits. This is a new market demand that's searching for solutions, and you've got a solution that could do that. That's why I think it's so intriguing right now.
I agree. I think the landscape has just completely changed since the initial brief, making it really, really intriguing. And yeah, this is definitely not one to go all in on, but it's a really interesting one. Any red flags people should be watching for? I mean, other than that, this is just a long timeline. That's not a red flag. But any red flags do you think people should be aware of before they invest in NuScale?
The cost overruns, right? These projects are so massive. You can go in with this set of expectations here, and then all of a sudden inflation pushes your cost up to here, and it just doesn't become economical anymore. And then just like you saw with Utah, it's very easy for somebody who was previously committed to something to say, no, I'm sorry, you told us it was going to be this, and now it's that. We just don't have that kind of flexibility to pay more for something like that. And so I think that, just the long-term budgeting of this, there's so many uncertainties of that. The regulatory oversight, right? Like it seems like nuclear is kind of being embraced by the Trump administration right now. That's why they gave the grant last year to TVA and to Intra1. But, if there was ever kind of a backlash, we don't want to go nuke, or you've got concerns about safety or regulations or things like that, that would certainly be a huge risk too you got to consider. But these are just massive capital projects. It's kind of like, the same thing as like investing in an oil well that would be put offshore or in another country. You've got risks associated with those massive projects for sure.
Well, thank you. I think that answers all my questions.
Yeah, great. So I think this is a fun one. And again, this was the one rebuy. I don't want to call it just a buy recommendation, but a rebuy recommendation that we came out with last week. It was interesting to see one of the sell recommendations was also in the AI data center space, which has been red hot recently. But this one had got some real red flags about corporate governance. And that's what the loss of credibility in that management team was one of the reasons we sold that company. And then 4 others, right? 5 total sell recommendations off the 7 investing scorecard. I think sometimes the sell recommendations are just as interesting content for our members as the buy recommendations. You can say, okay, some of these companies are getting a lot of attention out there, but there's some things that we really think you should be paying a little bit closer attention to as investors. So go check those out. 7 investing. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Heather. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, where can people find all of those? Where you were going?
7investing.com/subscribe. Again, first 7 days completely free. That, of course, will give you all the access to everything that I just talked about there. We also have a new buy recommendation coming out tomorrow. Tomorrow is the 1st of May. Got a new recommendation on the 1st of every new month. This is an exciting one in the consumer space. Nothing to do with nuclear power, but it's a familiar company. I am certain everyone watching this show has heard of before, probably even purchased from before, that is a screaming buy, in my opinion, right now. Great, great valuation at a 10-year most lucrative level. So I'll leave it at that, Heather. I'm going to leave it as a cliffhanger. We got a new buy recommendation coming out tomorrow.
Wonderful. I hope you have a lovely day.
Hope you have a lovely day as well. Thanks again for everybody tuning in. We will be back. I'm going to we'll cancel the show for tomorrow because we're going to be coming out with a new buy rec, but then we'll talk a little bit more on Monday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern time. We come back right here. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again next Monday.